Welcome to episode 15 of Real Health Radio.
Welcome to Real Health Radio. Health advice that's more than just about how you look. And here's your host, Chris Sandel.
Hi, and welcome to Real Health Radio. It's Chris Sandel, and today I have another guest on the show. Today's guest is Summer Innanen. Summer is a certified nutritional practitioner and a body image coach. She helps women all over the world to ditch their diet demons, amp up their confidence, and break free of the chronic dieting and guilt through her private and group coaching at summerinnanen.com. She is the creator of the 21-Step Body Image Remix, a life-changing 21-day program that helps women embrace their body and unleash the fierce, confident woman within. And her flagship Rock Your Body online program gets women off the all-or-nothing roller coaster by dealing with the underlying issues associated with food. She's also the creator and host of Fearless Rebelle Radio, a podcast dedicated to empowering women to live life on their own terms. And I've been following Summer's work now for about the last year. I'm not sure what initially put me onto her, but I started listening to her podcast and got really into them. And it's one of the podcasts I recommend a lot with clients. I then also got onto her mailing list and started following her different blog posts and her emails. And I really like her writing style. She's got a very fun writing style, very tongue-in-cheek a lot of the time. And it's really great to read, but she has a great message and some really useful information. So today we go through a lot of that stuff and looking at body image for a lot of it, looking at her story and how she got into doing the work that she's doing, and also talking about a new book that she has coming out. So it was a fantastic chat. I really enjoyed talking with Summer and hearing what she had to say. So let's get started. So Summer, welcome to Real Health Radio. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
Okay, so for people who don't know you, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into being a body image coach and helping women in this area?
Yeah, so I've told this story many times. So if anyone's heard me before, they probably are like, know it off by heart already. But for people who've never heard my story before, I think a lot of women can relate to it. Growing up, I was just one of those girls that I never felt good in my body. And there were a lot of reasons for that, much like a lot of the women that I work with. The experiences of our childhood can really shape our body image. And I was just never a comfortable kid. Like, I was always really self-conscious. I was last place in gym class. I was teased for my body pretty relentlessly by my older brother and just by other kids. And so I developed this belief about myself that there was something wrong with me, and that if I was able to, fix my body, then I would fix whatever was wrong with me. And that led me to spiral into dieting and exercise, which became pretty obsessive when I reached my 20s. Exercise addiction was something that I really struggled with, more so than the dieting, although that became worse later on. But I became really exercise obsessed, and I was just weight obsessed. So I would weigh myself, like 15, 20 times a day at sometimes. And everything was basically tied to my weight. So what I ate, how much I exercised, how I felt about myself, like everything was just connected to that number on the scale. And it became self-destructive and damaging. It got progressively worse as I got older. And my worst point was when I had discovered CrossFit, which was amazing because I realized, like, I really do love lifting weights, and I love the feeling of being strong. But the reason why I went into it was to lose weight, because that's why I did everything at that point in my life.
Yeah.
And I became pretty obsessed with it. And that's when I was introduced to the paleo diet. And, it solved some health issues that I was having. I was able to go off antidepressants that I had been on for 17 years. It resolved some gut issues that I was having. It helped with my insomnia, but I still wasn't happy. I was still, miserable in my body, as I would put it, or, really just uncomfortable in my own skin. It was a constant negative chatter going on and on about my body and just never really feeling comfortable. And because paleo had kind of resolved some of my health issues, I kept looking at it to solve all of my problems, including my self-worth. Yeah. And that's when I fell into the trap of taking it to a really extreme level. So, my worst point was when I was eating like 1,100 calories a day and I was working out 7 days a week and I was tracking all my food in a spreadsheet, and that was taking up 30 minutes a day. And I was at my quote unquote thinnest, and I still wasn't happy. And I remember sitting at my desk at work, putting my calories into a spreadsheet and thinking, how am I supposed to keep this up? And how can I take it even further? Because I'm still not happy. And that's when I started to really realize, like, something's wrong here, like something's going on, because there's no way I can keep this up. And with every attempt at, quote unquote, controlling my food, I would always rebound. I would always go through periods of just like, overeating and basically just my body trying to balance itself out from the chronic restriction. And so my weight would, increase a bit, and then I would try to do like another, eating clean for 4 weeks to try and bring it back down. And at some point in time, my body just started refusing to do that anymore. And so I went to see a naturopathic doctor because I just wasn't feeling well. And I was always thinking about food, and I was always thinking about exercise. It pretty much ruled my life. And the naturopath told me that I had adrenal fatigue, and it was pretty late stage adrenal fatigue, and that I needed to stop. I needed to stop working out. I needed to start eating more, that, I had really kind of done some damage to myself. My hormones were completely imbalanced. I had the estrogen levels of a postmenopausal woman. And that was kind of my wake-up call. That was like the universe hitting me on the head saying, you got to like really sort your stuff out. And that's when I started to look beyond food as the solution, because I'd been looking at food and exercise as the solution to all of my issues for the last 20 years. And now it was time to really dig deep and look at like what's really going on here. And what was really going on there was just that I was uncomfortable in my own skin. I was, my self-worth was connected to my appearance. I didn't want to, own what was really kind of causing the root of these issues. And so it was like, peeling off all of these layers of an onion to do all of this kind of, body image work, and just work on myself and on my mindset, on really discovering who I am outside of health and fitness, which led me to being who I am today, which is a woman who is, really comfortable in her skin, who doesn't really think about her body anymore, who just wakes up and puts on clothes and gets on with her life and eats what she wants and has a really great time. And it's pretty amazing, where I am now from where I've come from. And that's what really evolved into, how I help women today. So I'm a certified nutritional practitioner, but that really shifted into more of what I do now, which is body image coaching, and more of like the life coaching side of it, and helping women to break free of that chronic dieting that rules their life. I considered myself a quote unquote career dieter. Like, that's what I did. That was my main focus. And when I finally retired that and moved on with life, it became so much better. And so that's ultimately like, what I help women with now. And there's a lot more pieces to that story than what I covered there. But, I just want women to know that if they can relate to that, or men, that it's possible to get outside of that bubble and to just embrace your body. And my body's different than it was when I was going through that. And it's larger, but that just doesn't matter to me now. Like, that's just a relative, an irrelevant piece of the puzzle.
And what you described there, I mean, I've heard countless versions of that with other guests who I've had on the show and lots of clients. I mean, it is a very common story that people go through. And you said that you originally were more of a nutritionist and now you've shifted into doing the more sort of life coaching type stuff. And was your original reason for getting into being a nutritionist, was that down the route of I want to help myself lose weight and going down from, was that the impetus to start with?
Yeah, it totally was. Like, admittedly, like that was the reason why I wanted to change my career, because I worked a corporate job for 10 years and, you know, I was unhappy at that job. Like, I remember thinking to myself, like, I can't do this for 30 more years. Like, there's just no way. And I worked in the consumer packaged goods industry, and I was a consultant helping companies like sell more products that, you know, like I worked for Cadbury for a couple years, just to give you an example. And I helped companies like Kraft and Procter and Gamble and stuff like that. And so I was not passionate about that. I mean, I've always been more passionate about health, but, yeah, the impetus, as you said, like, I was so obsessed with losing weight that I was like, I want to make a career out of helping other women lose weight. You know, like we tend to coach what we need, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so, yeah, that I went back to nutrition school for that. So that was part and parcel of it. I wouldn't say that was entirely it. I mean, I really do believe that food is medicine, and that, you know, I still have like an interest in health, and, you know, I haven't like abandoned that completely, but there was always the underlying, like, I just want to help. I want to lose weight. I want to help other women lose weight. And when I kind of went through my own transformation, which was when I was, you know, towards the end of my schooling, was when all this stuff kind of like happened and started to come to the surface. And just working with women, trying to help them to lose weight, realizing like, this is like, something's really wrong here. Like, this is not working for me. This is not working for these other people. Like, ultimately what they want and what I wanted was just to feel comfortable in my skin, you know, was just to feel like I'm enough. And we're looking at food, we're looking to tweak it to get that feeling. And that's a complete disconnect. Like, that's not the means to get there. And so it was through my own transformation and also just experience seeing that in other women. And I apologize to everyone that I kind of like led down that road during that time, that I realized I needed to shift, not only like just in myself. And as I did that, and I learned so much more about body image, and I really like just studied it and like got so into that side of, you know, the psychology of it and the mindset of it, that I was able to then start helping people in a new way. And, you know, it's just the results I see with women now are just, it's amazing. You know, their body weight, well, I don't even know if it's changing. Who knows? Like, who cares? Or is the better response to that? But they end up feeling the way they want to feel, which is ultimately what we want. You know, we just want to feel a certain way.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important distinction for people to understand, because when people say, I want to lose weight, or I want to have a bigger house, or I want to have more money in the bank, or all of those different things that people aspire to, it's like, okay, well, what's under that? What do you get as part of that? And when you start to dig down, most of the things that people want, they can have without that event occurring.
Exactly. Or you need to kind of like, those are just external means. And so, you know, yeah, you want that feeling like it's, I mean, like Danielle Laporte's book, The Desire Map, is pretty much essentially like kind of talks to that. Exactly. But yeah, it's like, you know, you want a feeling of like peace or calmness or freedom or joy. And, you know, external things are not going to give you that. They're going to be just like these accessories, but you have to cultivate that inside. And that has to come from, you know, your mindset and looking at all the other kind of dynamics and things in your life that are perhaps out of alignment that need some tweaking in order to really cultivate those feelings.
And so when you were going through this transformation, this journey for yourself, were you doing that on your own, or were you working with someone? So I know you mentioned that you worked with a naturopath, but were you then working with someone else for that side of the things?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've worked with various coaches or, like a therapist and stuff like that. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I still do sometimes because I would be a liar if I told, and I tell this to everybody that follows me, but I would be a liar if I sat here and said, I have everything together. I know everything. Like, no, not at all. Like I still work with coaches on various things. I think we all, coaches need coaches. It's just we're constantly developing ourselves and improving ourselves and learning new things, and that's just what's so amazing about life. I think it would be boring if we were just like, oh, I'm there, I have it all together, everything's good. Like that's a lie. So.
And it's interesting when I find, because I follow lots of different people, and I really find it refreshing that people are now being much more honest about things, or at least certain people are more honest about things. And I'm always very wary of people like, no, I've got it all sorted out, this is all working perfectly, because normally they're hiding something, because no one has it all figured out. Like being a human being is really messy. And there will be good times and there'll be bad times.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I don't really fret about my body anymore. I mean, I don't really struggle with food anymore, but that doesn't mean I don't struggle with other things. And that's kind of what happens is like, I sorted out the body stuff, I sorted out the food stuff, but then like these other things surfaced that were kind of, that had been pushed down underneath the surface, that were always kind of part of it, that I was able to finally look at because I wasn't trapped in the food and body bubble anymore. And so I can see that more as like a gift as opposed to a hindrance.
Yeah. And I find, again, that's such a common thing that I discover with clients as well, is that once they remove the food as the distraction, it's not this amazing, rainbows and lollipops. It's like, oh, God, there's a whole heap of other stuff I need to deal with here. Mm-hmm. And that might not be an amazing realization for someone in terms of being great to start with, but it's when they can start to deal with that where you then see the real transformations.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that.
So you recently wrote an open letter to Oprah, which I loved. I showed on my Facebook page. For anyone who didn't see this, do you want to describe what it was all about?
Yeah, sure, I will. So, as many people saw in the news, Oprah invested, I believe, 10% into Weight Watchers, and as a child or like a teenage girl, I really. I went and watched Oprah every day. Like that was, something I did growing up. And so she was always kind of this symbol of like female empowerment. And I know a lot of women look up to her that way. And so what really, frustrated me about that news was that, she obviously has a ton of money. I'm sure she invested in many, many other organizations that are doing good work. But the fact that she put in such a huge chunk of money into an organization that I feel disempowers women, they perpetuate this idea that thin is better, and that they measure accomplishments in like pounds lost or food counted. And it perpetuates diet culture in our society. And, diet culture is something that, causes women to have these issues with food, causes women to feel like they're not good enough and think that they need to lose weight in order to be a better person or to be accepted. And frankly, like the more that women believe that, the more that they're spending time looking at themselves, fretting about their bodies, and not going out and doing really amazing things with their lives and making a difference in this world and following their calling and their purpose. And that to me is female empowerment. Like female empowerment is like, let's get women knowing that they can do whatever they want, and not have them like sitting in the kitchen counting calories or fretting over like the one too many Halloween candies that they ate, and going to weigh themselves in and get judged based on that. And so what really bothered me was that she stands for female empowerment, and yet she invested all this money in an organization, which is completely contradictory to that. And that she could have, put that money towards something that really does work towards female empowerment, like education, leadership, equality. And that's, that was pretty much the Coles notes of my rant.
Yeah. And I think from my perspective, one of the things that you talked about was, of all the people who should know this, Oprah, as being this seasoned dieter for the last 5 decades, and how much it just doesn't work.
Yeah. And, so to her credit, like, she said that she uses food as a coping mechanism, like as a numbing coping mechanism, and that Weight Watchers helped with that. Well, okay, so that's a mental health issue. That's not a fix it with food issue. Like, resisting food doesn't help with the food numbing issue. And so, yeah, like, she's a career dieter. It's just, and it's kind of sad to just see her kind of blame herself and say, like, this program works. The problem is just me, and then I'm not following it. And it's like, well, that's not really true. Something's probably broken if you've been doing it over and over for 30, 40 years and you're still getting the same result. Like, that's the definition of insanity. Yeah. But that insanity is normalcy in our culture. And that's the problem, is that, women just think it's them. And it's like, if you went to a hair salon and you had a hairdresser and he did something the complete opposite of what you wanted and you were miserable, like, would you blame yourself and then keep going back to him? Like, that's just like, we would never do that. We would go get a new hairdresser. But that's what we do with diets. Like, we blame ourselves and we keep going back to it. And that's what diet culture is. It's just like, it's fed into our minds that the onus is on us, that we can control it, that we're going to be better people if we get that under control. That's where our worth is tied up in. And, that's a problem. That's a big problem, because women are wasting their lives away, obsessing over their bodies and obsessing over food when they could be going out and doing really amazing things.
And there's also just a ton of research that looks at the more that people are focused on diet, the more likely they're going to use that as a coping mechanism. So if Oprah is much more likely to be using food as her coping mechanism, it's like, why is that more likely to happen? Why isn't there a ton of other coping mechanisms that she's using? And I'd say the likelihood is because dieting is so much a part of her life and has been for such a long time.
Mm-hmm. And that's such a huge thing, is the coping mechanism. Body image, like, hating your body is a coping mechanism. Controlling your food is a coping mechanism. That was such a huge, like, breakthrough for me, was that I realized that, like, my body obsession was just a diversion, like a coping mechanism for me. There was just this other emotional discomfort that I didn't want to face or feel. Tweaking my body became something I could quote unquote fix. Like, fat is really just, when people say, like, I feel fat, that's a metaphor for something else that they're just unable to express. Fat is not a feeling, thin is not a feeling. Like, our body shape is just our body shape. And until you can kind of really, like, get real with yourself and get honest about, like, what you truly are feeling and why that's showing up, then you kind of stay trapped using it as a coping mechanism. And so, like, peeling back that layer is so important.
And I'd seen you say that before, or put that in an article before, and I've talked to clients about it. And when I say, okay, when you have that feeling of I'm feeling fat, start to look at what's happened during your day, what's happened over the weekend, what it is that could have driven that. And so many times when people do it, the response is, oh, actually, I was asked to give a presentation at work and I now feel really uncomfortable doing it, or someone asked me out on a date, or like all of these things that trigger off emotions, and they then don't make that connection, and instantly I start loathing my body, because that's how I deal with any kind of anxiety.
Yeah, Yeah, it's huge. I mean, the negative voice in our head is really just trying to protect us from something. It's trying to, protect us from emotional discomfort. It's trying to protect us from fear. And so when we can really, compassionately look at ourselves and be like, what are you trying to protect me from? Like, what's really going on here? Then we can get to the root of it and actually do something with that information, because you can't just tell yourself, well, stop hating your body. Like, shut up, shut up. If you tell your negative voice to just shut up, like, that's not going to work. You got to understand why it's there. And, that piece of it is really, really integral in the work that I do with women, and what I encourage other women to do is to just really understand why that's happening.
Yeah. And I know a lot of your message is around sort of women loving their body and loving their body as is. And it's amazing how many people, when I talk to them about this concept, they can understand the idea intellectually, or they can understand it for other people. But it's much more difficult for them to accept for themselves. And so instead, for them, they want to be the ones that, it's fine, I'll just lose some weight and then I'll be able to get body love, and that's when it will happen. I mean, what would you say to someone like that, or who is thinking along those lines?
I don't really try to convince people. I feel like you have to kind of be ready for it.
Yeah.
And, most women sort of hit a point where they just can't do it anymore. Dieting, they just don't want to do it anymore. And that's when they can kind of, start to open up to this idea that there's another approach, And so I don't really aim to necessarily convince people to adopt that way of thinking. I think it's really important to challenge beliefs that you have. If you have this belief that you can't be happy and you can't be attractive and you can't be healthy unless you meet a certain size, we need to kind of challenge those beliefs. But if you're not ready to drop the weight loss, and you don't have to drop it 100%. I would say most of the women, when they come to work with me, they're the one foot is in the door and they're just well, I'm opening up to this idea. And I'm like, that's perfect. As long as you're opening that door a little bit, then I can pull you through to the other side.
Yeah.
But if that door is completely closed, then you're not ready. Then I'm not in a position to necessarily convince you right now. And you'll get there when you've had enough. When you just can't do it anymore and you're just ready to just be happy and accepting of yourself. And I also think, again, it comes back to challenging the beliefs. It's you have to ask the person, well, why do you want to lose weight? Because sometimes they just have this belief that you're able to then help them understand is not true. They may say, well, because I want to be, healthy. And then we can start to well, let's look, you can be healthy at many different sizes, or let's just talk about health then. Let's get you, moving around more often, or, eating more vegetables, and take weight out of the equation. Or if it's well, I just want to be more, confident, or I just want to feel more comfortable in my skin. Well, then I can open you up to the idea that you can have that if you focus on that and just let your body do what it's going to do.
Yeah. And before working with someone, I will have a chat with them for 45 minutes and an hour, something along those lines, because I work with people for a period of 5 months to make sure that they're on the same page. And as you say, to know that the door's at least open. Because if I'm chatting with them and they're like, no, it's got to be about weight loss, then I'm very honest. I'm saying, well, you are not the right person to work with me. I can't give you what you want. There's plenty of people out there who will tell you that they can help you with that, so maybe you should be chatting with them. But these are the reasons why I think you should be looking at it in this other direction. And it's then up to them to then make that decision.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I call it body-positive-curious. You're in that initial stage where you're kind of maybe there's something to this. Maybe I want to, I can explore this. And I'm as long as you start to become open-minded, it's it'll become a lot easier. You've got that one, you're starting to buy into it, which is great.
Yeah. And I often talk to people as that there has to be a little bit of a leap of faith. And I've been doing a lot of research recently on beliefs and where beliefs come from. And most of the time, beliefs come first, and then you find the supporting evidence afterwards. And that people are pretty biased within their opinion. And so if you can get someone to start to change their beliefs, they will then find supporting evidence around that stuff. And so, as you say, if you can just have that door be open, then it makes it a lot easier to do that.
Yeah, so true. So true. And I think that's another reason why people stay stuck too, though, is because like you bought into this belief. You've perhaps spent more than half of your life buying into this belief. It's hard to kind of say like, that, wow, is that really not true? Like I've wasted so much time and energy on this. Like it's, it's like there's a mourning that kind of comes along with that, to let go of those expectations that you had associated with, with like having like the quote unquote ideal body.
Oh, totally. It's like when you play poker and you realize at some point that you've got a really rubbish hand and you probably shouldn't have put some money in, but you're then pop committed and you're like, well, I don't want to go out now, look at all this time and all this thing that I've invested in it. It's easier for me to just stick with it, even though it starts to make more sense to question what you're actually doing.
That's such a good analogy. I've never played poker. I love that. That's so good.
So there was another article of yours where you were talking about the difference between body esteem and self-esteem and the problems with confusing the two of them. And I really like this, and it's something I talk about with clients a lot. So do you want to just tell a little bit about this, the points that you're making in the article, or what you mean the difference between those two?
I think I wrote that a while ago, so I'm going to just talk about it now. And then I don't know if that's actually going to be what I wrote in the article. But
that's fine.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I think I've actually like changed my perspective on it a little bit since then. But yeah, I mean, what happens is like we intertwine our self-esteem with our body esteem. And so, we think that in order to have good self-esteem, we have to, we have to love our body, which means we have to fit into like a certain ideal, and we let that dictate the way that we feel about ourselves. And so, untangling that and realizing that, having your self-esteem separate from your body esteem and not letting your body dictate your self-esteem is really imperative to, cultivating a sense of worth. Self-esteem is kind of an interesting word. I tend not to use it as much anymore because it sort of implies that you have to be good at everything, and we're never going to be good at everything. So I like the word, self-worth better, because that's just kind of more of a feeling of enoughness. So if we look at it in the scope of like self-worth, it's knowing that you're enough as you are, regardless of your appearance. Like if your body changes, if your weight goes up and down, if your things start to get wrinkly and saggy, it's just knowing that you're enough in whatever body that you have. And that really comes from the inside. Like that comes from your mindset and everything on the inside. It has to be unconditional, unconditional self-love. And that it means that no matter what your body looks like or your appearance, like you have to just have that feeling of enoughness. And that's really what good body image is.
Yeah. And I'll tell you then my take on it, and what I think about in terms of the idea is that so much of the focus is on how someone looks, and if they improve how they look, then it's going to have this trickle down effect on so much of other areas of their life. And really that narrative isn't true, and what people should be focusing on is much more of these other areas within their life that mean that they enjoy their job, or they enjoy their relationships, or they're doing things in their life that bring them genuine happiness, whether that's going out in nature, doing exercise, all of these things that are enjoyable within themselves and for the process, as opposed to the end goal of I'm going to look a certain way. And I would say a lot of the body positivity side of things, I feel falls down because too much of the body positivity side is looking at loving your body for the way that you look, as opposed to all of the other amazing things that it can do and all of the other amazing things that you do within your life.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the other place that it falls down flat for me is like this idea that, you know, like we're all beautiful and that you have to like feel beautiful. And it's like, you don't no, you don't. Like, you don't have to actually like your body all the time to have good body image, like to be body positive. You know, like I look in the mirror and I'm like, sometimes I like certain parts of my body and sometimes I don't, but that's what makes me human. And I think what really cultivates like an overall sense of worth and good body image is accepting that you're made up of good parts, you're made up of okay parts, and you're made up of not so great parts, and just like embracing that and being okay with that. Like, that's how you're going to be body positive. I certainly don't go around every day like thinking like, I'm so beautiful, I'm beautiful. Like, no, and we're not all beautiful, and it's okay if you're not. Like, that's humanity. And so that's certainly where like I get riled up about the body positive movement as well. I don't think it can do any harm. I think it's like, you know, anything that kind of promotes body positivity, I don't necessarily want to like criticize that, but I also want people to know that you don't necessarily have to like every part of yourself. Like, it's okay to not feel pretty. Like, you can still have a good body image and feel worthy and feel like you're enough, even if you don't think you're pretty or feel like you're, you know, like yourself, quote unquote. Like, it's really just this inner sense of peace that you want to get to. And I think when you can just like embrace that we're made up of all these evolving pieces of like good, not so good, and average stuff, then that's going to get you there that much faster.
Yeah. And what you said there about just understanding the different parts, and it seems that with appearance, there's so much more of an emotion attached to it, because when people don't feel that they look a good way, that has such a negative implications. People don't feel the same way about, I'm not good at maths, or I'm not a good driver of a car, or I'm not good at some other areas. Most of those other areas, people are like, well, that's just one of my weaknesses. But for when it relates to the way that someone looks, that's this horrible thing, and it really defines them. And it seems that there's way too much importance being placed on how someone looks and way less importance on much more important things in life.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, like, you would accept the fact that you're not a good parallel parker.
Yeah.
But like, if you don't like your stomach, like, that's the end of the world. And so that's where you need to really understand that, like, where that belief is coming from and like what that really means at your core. Like, what does that mean? If your stomach makes you uncomfortable, like, it's not your stomach, like, what is the belief that's sitting in there that's causing you to feel that way, that's causing you to intertwine it with your emotions? Is it this belief that like, well, I must not be attractive, and therefore, like, how does that and that's making me feel ashamed? Well, like, that's what you want to state then. Like, the issue is then like, I don't feel attractive and I feel ashamed, or I'm afraid of being judged and that's making me feel embarrassed. Like, that's what we want to get to the root of and the core of, is like, what's the actual kind of feeling and belief that's happening when we look at ourselves and we say, I don't like my stomach, or my stomach's making me feel a certain way. Because you can look in the mirror and say, I don't like my stomach, and still be okay with yourself, or you can look in the mirror and say, I don't like my stomach, and be in emotional turmoil. Yeah. And like, the difference between those two, like, one of those is kind of like a normal reaction, and the other one is like, okay, there's something else going on here, where you've intertwined that piece of yourself with with a belief and an emotion that we need to dig into and unravel.
Yeah, because your stomach then comes to define something really important about you versus your parallel parking, you couldn't care less.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
So I know you've got a new book coming out. I can't remember, you said you're in the process of just finishing off writing it. Where is it at the moment, and what's the book about?
So it's called Body Image Remix, Embrace Your Body and Unleash the Fierce, Confident Woman Within. So I have a program called the 21-Step Body Image Remix, which is, a 21-day program where you get an email every day for 21 days with a body image concept and then a mission to complete to actually take action. This is the book that is essentially like the theory around it. And so it's just about to go to the publisher. The final version is done. It's a self-help guide to help you discover, challenge, and reset beliefs that are holding you back from being unapologetic and imperfect in today's perfection-obsessed society. By the end, I want people to be able to get on with their life that they've been putting on hold because they've let their gene size dictate their self-worth. And so it's really for anyone who's ready to abandon this idea that their life is going to be better 10 pounds from now, or even if they're that person who's just like body positive curious with the 1 foot in the door. This will help you explore a new way of thinking that just looks at, all the different pieces of how to actually, like, quote unquote, love your body, which is essentially just like, I feel like I'm enough as I am. And so it's set to come out at the end of November. I'm going to be giving it away for free for a certain period of time. So when this airs, you'll be able to opt in to receive the book for free when it comes out. I believe the date is Friday, November 27th, but that may change by a small window, just depending on a couple of things that I have to lock down before this podcast actually goes live.
Yeah. Okay, great. And is the book, is there lots of exercises as part of the book that people can be doing, or is it more just theory-based stuff?
It's more the theory. It certainly has actions in it as well. And it has journal prompts as well to help you explore at the end of each chapter, there's journal prompts to help you explore the pieces that were laid out in the book. The more tangible actions come in the 21-step body image remix. However, most of them are alluded to throughout the book as well.
Okay. And so the end goal of someone reading that book, where are you hoping that they're gonna be when they finish it up?
Well, hopefully they'll be ready to kind of leap through that door if they're not already, like doing that. I think it depends on where they are to start, right?
Yeah,
so
of course.
If someone's, like totally new to this, then I'm hoping that this kind of, helps is the catalyst to really help them see that there's a life outside of it, and that, oh my goodness, those are all the beliefs that I was buying into. Like, I really want to start to challenge and change those beliefs. For someone who's a little bit more into body positivity, then this may just give them a few more light bulbs that they hadn't perhaps thought about, and some new actions and perspectives to take. So there's quite a bit in it. And I think, it's one of those things that you could continually just revisit a new chapter and sort of work on that for a bit before you move on to another chapter. As I always say to anyone who's doing this kind of work, there is no there, like there's no quote unquote there.
Yeah.
It's a really, up and down road. And so I think it'll be one of those things that someone can just keep coming back to, and perhaps picking up new tidbits of information and new things to try on and to take action.
Awesome. Well, look, I love reading your blog, so I'm really looking forward to reading that. It would be great. One of the things I talk a lot with clients about is their internal dialogue and what they're saying to themselves, what they're focusing on, and the stuff that there's basically inside their head as the day goes on. And I think you refer to this as your evil doppelganger or something along those lines.
Yeah, I do. I've dropped the evil just from a lot of the, the work I've done over the last year, kind of realizing that it's not evil, and that it's there for a reason, and that we don't want to think of it as evil. And so that's actually something I changed in the program and changed in the book. But that's that. I mean, so much of our body image is really about our mindset. And, when I work with women, they say it's almost like there's this constant negative chatter in my head. And so that's, what I call your doppelganger, which is essentially just a cute name for your evil twin. But I think when you can really create that separation, you can create that separation from yourself. So it's not your voice, that allows you to actually respond to the voice and work with the voice. Everyone has self-doubt. It never goes away completely. Like, it would be crazy to think that it would. If it's not picking on your body, it'll come back and pick something else apart about you at some point.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, if we can create that separation, and the reason why I dropped the evil was because I really realized that in a lot of ways, it's like, it almost represents this more innocent, piece of ourselves that's really just trying to protect us. And, when we can kind of compassionately understand why it's showing up, we become better equipped to respond to it. And so that's a lot of what I do with clients. That's, like an entire chapter in the book. And with that, you have to look at what you're feeding your doppelganger. Like, what do you have in your life that's really causing it to fire up and say those mean things about you? Things like, your social media, your scale and whatnot. So you want to get rid of anything that you're like actively feeding it. And then you also just want to understand, compassionately, like why it's showing up so that you can respond to it. So as you mentioned, changing that self-talk, you want to start to build up your compassionate self-talk.
Yeah. And I mean, as you say, there is a real reason that it's there. And if I'm thinking from an evolutionary perspective, it's good to have a critical voice. It's useful for someone to be challenging assumptions and be saying, okay, is that the right way of doing it? And so that you can start to learn, and it can be very helpful. But it's when that becomes quite, renegade and just is over the top, and you're really only hearing that critical voice and it's ad nauseum, that it really creates a problem. And as you say, starting to look at, okay, well, like A, why is that happening? And then B, what can you be doing to be sorting that out?
Yeah, and learning to really just respond to it and work with it. So it's just like this, it's like my doppelganger comes with me all the time, but I don't let it take the wheel. Like, I have the wheel now,
Yeah.
But it's always kind of there in certain respects. Like, it doesn't pick apart my body anymore, but it'll pick apart other things that I'm doing. But it's, anytime you push yourself outside your comfort zone, it's going to show up. Like, it's a part of our psyche that is, a reflection of our safety mechanism. And I learned this. So one of my mentors, one of my coaches was Tara Moore, who wrote this book called Playing Big. And I took, I worked with her for 6 months in her coaching program, like in her facilitators program. And so that's where I learned so much of this. And that's where so much has kind of evolved over the last year, I would say. But, being able to to respond to it and know that it's our safety mechanism. So it doesn't want us to experience emotional discomfort. It doesn't want us to experience self-actualization. It doesn't want us to experience joy. It wants to keep us safe. So anytime that we're going after those things, it's going to fire up. And well, you better believe that, like, owning yourself and owning your body in a world that has like a quote unquote ideal is definitely pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone. So doing this work often makes it fire up more because you're starting to push yourself outside of that comfort zone. And so that's why it's really important to like understand why that's happening, what fears are rooted in that, whether it's like a fear of rejection, a fear of vulnerability, a fear of judgment. And just to name a few, there's so many more. Everyone's is really different, but understanding that then allows you to kind of just say like, okay, like, how do I want to respond to this? And what action do I want to take? Like, you don't have to listen to it anymore. Yeah.
And just, as you say, it can be a conversation as opposed to something that is said and then is an absolute truth.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's so much of it's just our internal conversation. And you can sound like a crazy person when you're doing it. You're just like, I'm talking to this other piece of myself with like my compassionate voice versus like my doppelganger voice. But like in all honesty, like that's how you do it. And that's how it works. Like, it's just, and it's once you kind of have that skill and it's a practice and you get better and better at it, it's amazing how many kind of leaps you can take to live the life that you want because you realize how much it was really just like holding you back.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that you said that was really important is it doesn't go away. And I'm a big fan of Brené Brown, a lot of her work, and she talks about this in terms of shame and sort of other aspects where there is no getting rid of this stuff. It's just becoming more comfortable with the discomfort and being more okay with it being there, understanding how to deal with it, as opposed to this place where you get to this point where nothing phases you and everything's amazing. I think too many people have that belief that that's where they're going to end up, and when they're doing lots of change work, it's like, oh, I'm obviously not doing it right because I'm not hitting that point. And so a lot of the time when I'm working with people, and I bet you've probably noticed the same, is really managing expectations about where they should end up and what is likely to happen, and having that be in reality as opposed to something that's just never going to happen.
Mm-hmm. And that, yeah, I mean, Brene Brown is like my hero. Like, I've read all of her stuff.
Yeah.
Some of it multiple times. It's one of those, she's one of the authors that I recommend to everyone because I think, she nails so much of the underlying stuff that goes along with body image, like, the shame and the vulnerability, and like her latest book, just talking about like rising strong and having the courage to, come out the other side. Yeah. Like when we're talking about body image work, you're pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone. You're stepping outside of that bubble, even if it's something as simple as like wearing shorts to the gym. Like you're putting yourself in a new situation that's really, really scary for you. It might not be for other people, but for people that this resonates with, it can feel really scary. And being able to have the courage to do it, first of all, to feel the emotional discomfort that's going to come as a result of it. But every time you do that, you build more resiliency, like you get stronger, and you're able to do it, and it becomes like just easier. But the overall like discomfort of life, like that doesn't go away. I think showing up as yourself in this world, being true to yourself, being true to your values, some people aren't going to like you, and that hurts. Like you can't take that away. Like that hurts. But knowing that like what's more important to you is like authenticity. Like what's more important to me is having people in my life who just value me unconditionally. As long as like you're grounded and rooted in that, it makes it easier to move through that discomfort. And it actually feels more freeing. Like it feels so much more freeing when you've been true to yourself, when you've taken a risk, when you've done something courageous, and maybe even it hasn't gone well. Like I'd rather have that than just feel trapped in fear and let fear dictate my every move.
Yeah. And the thing is, if you want to achieve some level of greatness and whatever that then means for you, there are going to be things you try out and fail, and you're going to fail way more than you actually succeed. But that's just life.
Yeah, I encourage people to have like inspirations. Like I have a lot of inspirations that of women who, like, even take Brene Brown for instance. There's tons of criticism about her. Like if you look at like her Amazon reviews, there's going to be negative ones. If you look at her videos, there's going to be people who criticize her. Like, and I love her. I think she's doing amazing work. Like if she listened to that criticism, if she let that fear of criticism or fear of judgment dictate her, we wouldn't have her amazing work in this world. And like that's something I tell all of my clients and every woman out there, is that like greatness comes with like, you're going to have criticism, like you can't let that stop you from moving ahead. And so it's good to have inspirations and to continually look at those inspirations, like just women in history who have done like amazing, radical, cultural changing things, and use those as your inspiration, because they had a ton of resistance, but they still went and did it anyways. And like, so I'm always like, looking at like women who were, I can admire, and just like reading their stories and then, just trying to channel that in my own life, and knowing that like, like greatness and I mean, we're talking about like big things here, but even just little things like wearing shorts to the gym, like it's just, you got to kind of move through that discomfort in order to get more comfortable and to do the things that you really want in life, which is just to, have joy or be free or whatever that is for you.
Yeah. And the greatness has to be relative to what's going on with you. So in your example, wearing some shorts to the gym for someone might sound like absolutely nothing, for someone else is huge. And yeah, I'm always very aware of that with clients, when they make small changes, a lot of the time they downplay it. And I'm like, do you realize that a month ago you weren't able to eat those foods? or you weren't able to have that in the house, or you weren't able to do this or that. And getting them to realize that for them, it's a really big thing. It doesn't matter if it could be really easy for their partner or someone else. If that's something that's very difficult for them, it should be honored in how much of a change that is.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, everyone's going to have different fears of certain things. And anytime that we decide that we're not going to let that fear dictate our action anymore, and we're going to take the action anyways, we're going to step into a space that's, a little more vulnerable, whatever that is for you. That's amazing. And you should be proud of that. And that takes a lot of bravery to do that. And because odds are good that you probably weren't doing that before. And yeah, you got to recognize every little thing. That's something I really preach, is just always celebrating every little success, because every little success is just another little seed that's planted that's going to get you, flourishing and really just planting those roots.
Great. So if someone was wanting to find out more about you and they like what you're having to say, where should they be heading?
So you can find more of me at summerinnanen.com, or you can just go, if you don't want to spell that name, which is INNANEN, you can go to thebodyimagecoach.com, and that'll just redirect you to my website. I have a couple of things there. I have my free ebook and my free 10-day body confidence makeover, which is at summerinnanen.com/freebies. I also have a private Facebook community that's free that you get invited to when you sign up to get the free 10-day body confidence makeover, where it's just, women supporting each other. Because I think when you're doing this work, you can feel alone. You can feel like there's a lot of shame around it. And so I wanted to create a community that was supportive and where you could share your stories and your struggles and get that support network, as well as my assistance. And so there's that. And then, the free book, which I think, you will probably link to in the post for this podcast.
Yeah, I'll put all the links for your different sites and Facebook and Instagram and all of that in the show notes as well, but definitely be putting in the link for the free book.
Cool. Yeah. So that I'm really excited about.
Awesome.
Oh, and I have a podcast too. Sorry, I should mention that.
And I should have mentioned that as well. Go on, you talk about it.
So my podcast is called Fearless Rebelle Radio, and Rebel is spelled REBELLE, which, Chris, you're going to be a guest on, which we have to book as soon as this recording is done. And it's essentially a podcast dedicated to empowering women to live life on their own terms. So I have a lot of other fellow coaches on just talking about, different area, a lot of body image talk, a lot of, anti-diet talk, a lot of getting off the diet cycle or the diet binge cycle talk, and also just other coaches that work in other realms, whether it's fitness or life coaching or relationships, all that kind of stuff that's just going to help you to live more fearlessly. And That's on iTunes.
And I highly recommend people check out the podcast, because it's great. I really like Summer's podcast. I recommend and send it to clients very regularly, so definitely check that out.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Cool. So look, it's been wonderful chatting with you today, Summer. I'm so happy you came on the show, and there's so many insights you're able to share. And then, as I said, the book sounds like it's going to be awesome.
Thank you. Yes, I'm very excited about it. And thank you so much for having me on this show. This is awesome.
Thanks for listening to Real Health Radio. If you are interested in more details, you can find them at the 7 Health website. That's www.7health.com.